At Thanksgiving dinner, my grandson innocently revealed my son and daughter-in-law had taken my beach house, claiming I was too old to remember. I simply smiled, but a cold dread settled deep in my bones. They never saw me coming. This is my story. Please like and share, and tell me what city you're listening from. The heavy oak front door of my son Dan and his wife Vicky's home swung open before my hand even reached the knocker. 8-year-old Leo, my only grandson, launched himself into my arms with the boundless energy only a child can possess. "Grandma Ellie," he shouted, his voice a pure, joyful sound amidst the low hum of distant adult conversation. I hugged him tight, burying my face in his soft hair, a small island of comfort in what had become an ocean of unease. Walking through their entryway, past the gleaming marble floors and under a crystal chandelier that dripped like frozen tears, I couldn't help but notice the changes. Again, every holiday gathering seemed to bring a new layer of opulence to their home. Last Easter, it was the imported Italian leather sofa in the living room. Now, a colossal, abstract painting dominated the dining room wall, its vibrant colors clashing with the subtle, expensive silk drapes. Dan was a mid-level manager at a local tech firm, certainly comfortable, but these furnishings screamed a budget far beyond what I knew he earned. I'd always tried not to dwell on it, dismissing it as Vicky's expensive tastes or perhaps a bonus I didn't know about, but a tiny, persistent voice in my mind always whispered its doubts. Vicky emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a designer apron, her smile a little too wide, her eyes a little too bright. "Eleanor, so glad you made it. Dan is just setting the table." She gestured towards the dining room, where Dan, my usually easygoing son, looked unusually tense, his brow furrowed as he meticulously arranged silverware. There was a nervous energy about Vicky, a sort of guardedness I'd come to associate with our recent visits. It was as if she was constantly bracing for something, or hiding it. Dinner began with the usual polite small talk, punctuated by the clinking of forks against fine china. Vicky prattled on about Leo's school achievements and a new fitness class she'd started, her laughter a little too loud, a little too frequent. Dan, on the other hand, was unusually quiet, picking at his food, avoiding my gaze more often than not. A faint sheen of sweat seemed to perpetually cling to his temples. My unease grew, a subtle tightening in my chest. But I pushed it down, reminding myself it was Thanksgiving, a time for family, not suspicion. We were halfway through the meal, discussing the upcoming school break, when Leo, bless his innocent heart, piped up. His face, usually a canvas of playful mischief, was now alight with pride and curiosity. "Grandma Ellie," he began, his voice cutting through the polite drone of conversation. "Are you enjoying the beach house that I made Daddy give you?" The fork paused halfway to my mouth, a piece of turkey trembling precariously on its tines. My breath hitched. "Beach house? What beach house?" I lived in a modest 2-bedroom rental apartment, had done so for the past 15 years since my husband passed. The very idea of owning a beach house was a distant, unreachable dream, something from another lifetime. A wave of confusion, cold and disorienting, washed over me. Vicky, who had just been about to take a sip of wine, visibly choked. The glass clattered against the table, spilling a crimson splash onto the pristine white tablecloth. Her face, moments ago flushed with feigned cheer, went stark white. Her eyes, wide with sudden panic, darted from Leo to Dan, then back to me. "Leo, darling," she said, her voice strained, a forced laugh rattling in her throat. "What are you talking about?" "Eat your mashed potatoes." But Leo, oblivious to the sudden icy silence that had fallen over the table, was too excited to be deterred. "The beach house," he insisted, his little hands gesturing wildly. "The one with the big deck where you can see the ocean. And the place for the boat? Remember, Daddy?" He turned to Dan, his eyes shining with pure joy, completely unaware of the bomb he had just dropped. "Mommy says it's very special. I helped Daddy pick it out for you." A knot began to form in my stomach. The "for you" part of his innocent revelation felt like a hammer blow. He continued, his voice growing louder with enthusiasm. "Daddy bought it for you because you're old and you needed somewhere nice to live." The word "old" stung, but the implication behind it cut deeper. Old? Needed somewhere nice to live? As if my current home wasn't good enough. as if I was incapable of managing my own affairs. A cold dread, chilling and pervasive, began to spread through my veins. My hand instinctively reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against the familiar, worn metal of my apartment keys. My modest, perfectly adequate apartment keys. Dan, who had been staring fixedly at his plate, suddenly snapped, his voice sharp and laced with an unfamiliar anger. "Leo, that's enough. Finish your dinner." Vicky quickly jumped in, attempting to salvage the situation with another strained laugh. "Oh, kids and their imaginations, right, Eleanor? He's been watching too many cartoons about fantasy homes." Her eyes, however, pleaded with me. A desperate glint that betrayed her forced composure. But I wasn't looking at Vicky. My gaze was fixed on Dan. The sheen of sweat on his forehead was more pronounced now, his jaw tight, his eyes refusing to meet mine. Guilt. It was etched all over his face, unmistakable and damning. The confusion in my mind solidified into a terrifying certainty. "Daniel," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in my chest. I used his full name, a formality I reserved for serious moments. "What is your son talking about?" Vicky, seemingly unable to withstand the pressure of my direct question, mumbled something about checking the pie in the oven, and fled the dining room with an almost comical urgency, leaving Dan and me alone with Leo. Before Dan could even formulate a response, Leo, ever the innocent messenger, added the final, crushing piece of information. "Mommy says you gave it to us to take care of for you because you're too old to remember important stuff. Grandma Ellie." The words hung in the air, echoing the full, horrifying scope of the deception. Too old to remember. Gave it to them. My chest tightened with a searing pain, a mixture of hurt and incandescent anger. This wasn't just about a house. It was about my autonomy, my dignity, my entire sense of self, stolen and dismissed under the guise of my age. Dan closed his eyes, a defeated sigh escaping his lips. He ran a hand through his hair, then finally opened his eyes, meeting mine with a look of profound shame and regret. His voice was barely a whisper when he spoke. "Mom," he said softly, "we need to talk." 2 days dragged by, each hour a heavy weight, since that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner. My mind replayed Leo's innocent words, "too old to remember important stuff," over and over, a cruel echo in the silence of my apartment. Sleep was a distant memory, replaced by a restless tossing and turning, my chest tight with a mixture of confusion, hurt, and a growing, bitter anger. Then, Dan called. His voice on the phone was heavy, thick with a cocktail of shame and thinly veiled fear. "Mom," he began, his usual easygoing tone replaced by a strained formality. I need to come over," about what Leo said. I agreed, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. I knew this conversation was coming. I had been dreading it, and simultaneously desperate for it. He arrived alone, as I knew he would. The Dan who stepped into my humble living room was not the vibrant, confident son I remembered. He looked disheveled, his clothes rumpled, his hair unkempt, and deep shadows underscored his eyes, making him appear years older than his 35. He avoided my gaze, his eyes fixed somewhere on the worn rug, as if a confession was etched there. We sat at my old kitchen table, the very same chipped formica surface where I'd helped him with his homework, where we'd shared countless meals and late-night talks, where I'd offered advice and comfort over the years. Now, it felt like a vast, uncrossable chasm had opened between us, separating mother and son. The familiar setting, instead of offering solace, only magnified the coldness. I didn't offer him coffee or tea. There was no need for pleasantries. My voice, when I spoke, was calm but firm, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. "Just tell me the truth, Daniel." He flinched at the use of his full name, a clear sign of the gravity of the moment. He took a shaky breath, running a hand over his face. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper, a stark admission of a painful reality. "There's no beach house, Mom." A fresh wave of disappointment, though not surprise, washed over me. I had known, of course. My rational mind had pieced it together, even as my heart clung to a sliver of hope. He continued, his words spilling out in a hesitant torrent. He confessed that Vicky had been the one to tell Leo about the imaginary beach house. She had painted vivid pictures for our grandson, creating a fantasy where Grandma Ellie was living happily in luxury by the sea, a place he believed his daddy had bought for me. All to explain away. What? It clicked then, a sickening realization. The money, Daniel, I said, my voice rising slightly, the calm beginning to crack. All the money I've been giving you over the years, the loans for your mortgage down payment, for Leo's daycare, for car repairs, for new business opportunities. What about all of that? He squirmed, his shoulders hunching. Vicky. She said it was easier if Leo thought we were helping you instead of the other way around. It made it sound better. He spoke rapidly, as if the words would hurt less if delivered quickly. He described how Vicky had painstakingly woven a web of deceit for Leo. The money I had given them for their house down payment, money I had saved meticulously for my retirement, was transformed in Leo's mind into me buying a condo for myself. The monthly checks I wrote for what I believed were essential expenses like Leo's expensive daycare, or to help with their soaring grocery bills, were spun into stories of me being so happy and comfortable in my supposed new life that I was helping them out, showering them with gifts. The latest fabrication, the beach house, was a recent invention, a desperate measure, he admitted. Leo, bless his inquisitive nature, had started asking too many questions about why Grandma was always giving us money. My stomach churned. I had been living frugally, carefully managing my modest pension and Social Security, sometimes even going without certain comforts to ensure I could help my son and his family. And all this time, my grandson believed I was living in a lap of luxury, a lie concocted to justify his parents' financial dependency, if not outright theft. The humiliation burned, a bitter, searing pain. How much money are we talking about, Daniel? I asked, the devastating question hanging in the air like a guillotine. He dropped his head into his hands, his voice muffled. About $60,000. Over the past 3 years, $60,000. My entire savings. The sum hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. My retirement nest egg, diligently built over decades, gone. Used not for a beach house for me, but to fuel a lifestyle they couldn't afford. The expensive new furniture, the crystal chandelier, the designer clothes Vicky wore, the fine china on the Thanksgiving table. It all flashed before my eyes, no longer symbols of their success, but of my stolen future. The new couch, the chandelier, the china, I listed, my voice now laced with a cold fury. That was my money, wasn't it? He nodded miserably, still refusing to meet my eyes. Vicky said, she said we needed to look successful. For her career, for connections, to impress people. Stop. I cut him off sharply. The excuses, the justifications, the constant deflection to Vicky. It was too much. Stop making excuses for her, and start taking responsibility for what you've done, Daniel. That broke him. He finally looked up, his eyes brimming with tears, his face crumpled. I'm so sorry, Mom, he choked out, his voice cracking. It got out of hand. I didn't know how to stop it. You could have stopped it, I pointed out, my voice hard, by telling the truth. At any point, you watched me live carefully. You let me worry, all while you took my money and let Vicky weave these lies. He hung his head again, seemingly unable to respond. After a moment, he mumbled, a new edge of bitterness entering his tone. She says you have more than you need. She says Social Security is free money anyway, and that family should help family. The words landed with the impact of a revelation. This wasn't just about debt or bad choices. This was entitlement, a complete disregard for my well-being, justified by a twisted sense of familial right. In that moment, looking at my son, I realized I was looking at a stranger. The boy I raised, the man I thought I knew, was gone, replaced by someone complicit in a cruel deception. My voice was quiet, hollow, completely drained of emotion. I need you to leave now, Daniel. He looked up, surprised, a flicker of something new in his eyes, fear of consequences. What are you going to do? He asked, his voice barely audible. I met his gaze, my eyes dry, my resolve hardening into steel. I'm not going to pretend anymore that everything is fine when it's not. The days after Dan's confession blurred into a painful, disorienting haze. His whispered admission, $60,000, played on a relentless loop in my mind. Each repetition, a fresh stab of betrayal. Sleep was an impossible luxury, and food, when I even thought of it, turned to ash in my mouth. My small apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt suffocating, filled with the ghosts of past conversations, each one replaying itself with a sickening new context. Every memory, every phone call, every tearful plea from Vicky, every casual remark from Dan, now felt like a carefully placed landmine, exploding with the realization of how expertly I had been manipulated. My love for them, my unwavering desire to help my son and protect my grandson, had been weaponized against me. I saw it all now, with a horrifying clarity that brought both anger and profound shame. How could I have been so blind? So trusting? The shame wasn't just for being deceived, but for having my deepest affections twisted into a tool for their greed. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely only a few days, I forced myself to move. I needed to see it, to quantify it, to truly grasp the scale of their deceit. My kitchen table, the silent witness to Dan's confession, became a makeshift crime scene. I spread out my bank statements, a chronological record of my dwindling savings, each page a testament to their insidious plundering. The crisp white paper, usually a mundane necessity, now felt heavy. Each line, a potential accusation. My finger traced down the columns, past the small, regular withdrawals for groceries and utilities, past the modest pension deposits, until it stopped at an entry from about 18 months ago, a transfer of $2,500. The description, handwritten in my own meticulous script in my ledger, read, Leo, emergency dental after bike fall. A vivid memory flashed into my mind. Vicky's voice, thick with feigned tears, calling me late one evening. Leo had supposedly fallen off his bike, requiring urgent dental work. She had sounded so distraught, so worried about her son's pain, and so helpless about the unexpected bill. My heart had gone out to her instantly. My grandson, hurt? Of course, I would help. I had transferred the money without a second thought, reassured by Vicky's effusive thanks that night, her promise to pay me back as soon as we can. Eleanor, you're a lifesaver. The memory now felt like a cruel joke. Had Leo even fallen? Had there been any dental work at all? A cold certainty settled in my gut. Probably not. My finger moved down, past more small transactions, until another significant withdrawal stood out. Last Christmas, a transfer of $3,000. My ledger noted, furnace repair. Dan and Vicky. I remembered that call too. Dan had sounded genuinely worried, describing how their furnace had inexplicably broken down just as a bitter Michigan winter storm was rolling in. Leo will get sick, Mom, he'd pleaded, his voice tinged with panic. We just can't afford an emergency repair right now. My immediate thought had been of Leo, shivering in a cold house, and I had wired the money that very hour. But then another memory, one I had dismissed at the time, resurfaced with chilling clarity. I had visited them 2 weeks later, bearing gifts for Leo and a casserole for their New Year dinner. The house had been perfectly warm, even cozy, and then I'd seen it. The new leather sectional dominating their living room, replacing the perfectly adequate, if slightly worn, fabric sofa, and beside it, a gleaming, expensive coffee table that had certainly not been there before. Vicky had quickly, almost too quickly, explained it away with a bright smile. Oh, we got such a great deal on them, Eleanor. A clearance sale you wouldn't believe. I had smiled back, genuinely happy for their good fortune, blissfully unaware that my good fortune had become theirs. The pattern, once invisible, was now starkly clear. Each large withdrawal corresponded to a similar story, a carefully constructed narrative designed to pluck at my heartstrings and open my purse. There was $1,800 for car repairs after their minivan allegedly broke down on a family trip, leaving them stranded. Then $2,200 for Leo's allergic reaction medical bills, a terrifying tale of an ambulance ride and emergency room visits that, Upon reflection, I had never heard a follow-up about. I had simply been relieved. Leo was okay, grateful I could help. And most recently, just a few months ago, a $500 transfer for Leo's tutoring, because he was supposedly struggling in his advanced classes. My bright, intelligent Leo, struggling? Impossible, I had thought. But the idea of him falling behind worried me, so I'd sent the money to ensure he got the best support. Each entry confirmed it. A deliberate, systematic campaign of deception, crafted with surgical precision to exploit my deepest affections, my love for my son, and above all, my profound devotion to my grandson. It wasn't just about the money, although the $60,000 was a staggering sum, a lifetime of careful saving. Gone. The true pain was in the betrayal itself, the calculated cruelty of their lies. It was in the realization that the people I loved most, the people I had sacrificed for, had seen me not as a mother or a grandmother, but as a resource to be tapped, a convenient ATM for their lavish lifestyle, while simultaneously undermining my dignity with talk of me being too old to remember important stuff. The sheer sophistication of their deception, the way they had weaponized my love, felt like a violation of the most sacred trust. The money was gone, yes, but something far more precious had been stolen. My sense of security, my faith in my family, and a piece of my own heart. The bank statements, a ledger of betrayal, lay scattered on my kitchen table. The immediate pain of the $60,000 loss was acute, but a deeper, more insidious hurt festered. The knowledge that the very fabric of my family life, woven with threads of love and trust, had been meticulously unraveled by lies. Each memory, once cherished, now felt tainted, poisoned. The $500 transfer for Leo's tutoring nagged at me. My grandson, struggling in advanced classes? It had never sounded right. Leo was bright, a curious and quick learner, determined to expose every layer of their deceit. I picked up the phone. My fingers, trembling slightly, dialed the familiar number for Leo's elementary school. "Mrs. Patterson," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is Eleanor Vance, Leo's grandmother. I was calling about the tutoring program." "I believe Leo was enrolled recently?" There was a pause on the other end, a slight rustle of papers. Then, Mrs. Patterson's voice, kind but confused, came through. "Mrs. Vance, are you sure you have the right student? Byron is one of our top students. He's never needed tutoring. In fact, his teacher just recommended him for the gifted and talented program for next year." The phone felt heavy in my hand, suddenly colder than the Michigan winter outside. My stomach churned, a sickening lurch that mirrored the freefall of my heart. Even Leo's academic achievements, his natural brilliance, had been twisted, warped into another opportunity for them to extract money from me. They had invented a problem, a vulnerability for my grandson, just to feed their insatiable greed. I mumbled a quick thank you and hung up, the click of the receiver echoing the finality of yet another exposed lie. That afternoon, a strange, almost compulsive urge took hold of me. I needed to see it, to witness the fruits of their deception firsthand. I drove across town to Dan and Vicky's affluent neighborhood, the same route I'd taken countless times for family gatherings. I parked my modest sedan discreetly across the street from their house, feeling like a common stalker, but unable to tear myself away. Their home stood proud and imposing, a beautiful two-story structure with freshly painted siding and meticulously manicured lawns. The very air around it seemed to hum with an expensive sheen. In the driveway, gleaming under the weak winter sun, sat Vicky's brand-new SUV, a luxury model I knew cost a small fortune. My money, all of it, funding this facade of success. Just then, the front door opened, and Vicky emerged, dressed in expensive athleisure wear that clung perfectly to her toned figure. Her hair was flawlessly styled, her makeup impeccable. She looked radiant, confident, utterly devoid of any hint of financial strain or hardship. As she locked the door and strode towards her luxury vehicle, a wave of bitter recognition washed over me. This woman, who had wept on the phone about Leo's dental emergencies and broken furnaces, was living a life of pampered ease, financed by my sacrifices. Memories, once harmless observations, now pierced through me with the force of revelations. Vicky's succession of designer handbags, each one a significant investment. Leo's seemingly endless supply of new, brand-name clothes, when a child his age outgrows them so quickly. The premium organic groceries I'd sometimes seen her unload from her car. The premium cable package they bragged about. The regular landscaping service that kept their lawn immaculate. All of it, quite possibly, paid for with my Social Security, my carefully managed pension, my lost savings. I thought of my own life. My wardrobe consisted of a few sensible dresses and sweaters, worn until they frayed. My grocery cart was filled with store-brand essentials, carefully selected after much coupon clipping. My modest apartment was cleaned by my own hands. I lived a life of quiet frugality, believing I was responsibly managing my limited resources while also helping my struggling son. The stark contrast was a painful testament to their hypocrisy. Another memory surfaced. Another emergency. About a year ago, Vicky had called, her voice laced with an urgency I now recognized as practiced.